It's Cosplay Thatcher. Liz Truss is the new Conservative Party leader and our Prime Minister. Hello, Tarky here. It's the 5th of September 2022 and, to no one's great surprise, Liz Truss has been announced as the new leader of the Conservative Party and therefore the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. From the original 8, the parliamentary party whittled it down to 2, and then between Rishi Sunak and Liz, they've spent the last 8 weeks trying to pander to the very, very narrow, illiberal needs of a tiny portion of the voting public called the Tory party membership. This number's somewhere between 160 and 200,000. No one outside the Tory party is entirely sure exactly how many, and they are ultimately considerably to the right of the majority of Conservative voters, let alone obviously the voters as a whole of the United Kingdom. It also has to be said that they are considerably more white, male, wealthy, elderly, and of course right-wing than the population as a whole. This has a bearing. There's an excellent piece in the New Statesman this morning which goes into some considerable detail about the ways in which the Tory party has selected its leader over the last 40 to 50 years. I won't bore you with the details. This piece goes into it in much better detail than I can, but it's well worth a read, and if you sign up for their excellent newsletters, you can read it for free. In fact, you could read up to 3 articles per month, so it's worth the look. However, over the last 8 weeks, the final 2 candidates, Rishi Sunak and Liz herself, have been pandering to this illiberal selectorate by throwing out the things they want to hear: tax cuts, anti-wokery. In fact, I have a list here, just a quick brief list. Liz has pledged more fracking and North Sea drilling and to get rid of solar panels. Called the civil service woke. Promised nearly 9 billion in public sector pay cuts and then U-turned. Pledged a draconian crackdown on trade unions because of course they keep doing that naughty thing where they get fed up with the fact that their wages are falling far behind inflation and therefore going on strike. Perfectly legitimate, but not if you're a Tory. Also said it's fair to cut taxes for the rich, even as those tax cuts will benefit the rich far, far more than they will the poor, who are going to be most in need of financial support in the coming energy crisis, let alone because inflation is perhaps forecast to reach nearly 20% by some experts. She's also been heard insulting UK workers as Treasury Minister. She forms part of a very sad set of people who wrote a book described as a cut and paste marvel called Britannia Unchained 10 years ago, in which they all claimed that once they get into work, the average British worker is the laziest in Europe. Nothing like attacking your potential voters. She's been heard repeating this again in more recent times as I said, as Treasury Minister. It's hard to countenance. I find her use of language is extraordinarily antagonistic to people she should not be being antagonistic to. It's almost as though she's forgotten that the 200,000 people she's got to fob off with throwaway policies to get elected as the leader of the Tory party are the only people that will ever vote for her ever again, when in fact it's not looking good in the polls for the moment for the Tory party versus the country. You can see an awful lot in language. She's thrown out the idea that handouts and bungs to poor people, yes, she did indeed use the word bungs, to poor people to manage the forthcoming energy crisis, are not something she would be countenancing. It would all be done by tax cuts and yet more public borrowing. This would seem to set her against her Thatcherite hero, because Margaret Thatcher's Tories would never have countenanced unfinanced public borrowing in a situation like this. They might have desired low taxes, but they'd have understood it wasn't really on the cards. As I said, it's very, very difficult to understand what she's thinking unless it's her overweening ambition has led her to say these things. And in fact, once she is in power and appointed her cabinet, they will be obliged to perform massive U-turns on what she promised to the Tory party electorate to basically save the country. I don't think it's too much of an exaggeration to say that household energy bills potentially trebling by January to March next year. Business energy bills, they are of course not capped as household bills are already reporting that their bills and forecasts are going up by 500%, which may, if anything, have even more harm on the British economy and the British way of life. Simple enough that poor people are going to be faced with a choice of heating or food this winter if they choose to try to pay any of those bills. Things are going to be very difficult. A friend of mine said that perhaps my last video lacked a solid conclusion. So here it is. I am inclined to agree with him. Here's my conclusion for this one. This country is in trouble, deep trouble, and has spent 8 weeks watching the two prime candidates for leadership of the Conservative Party, and therefore the next Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, ducking the issues. They have simply set out their stalls to please a tiny proportion of the UK voting population, a tiny non-representative portion of the UK population. Her cabinet, from some of the forecasts seen, looks as though it's going to be the most right-wing in living memory, packed with the same sort of people that were in Boris Johnson's cabinet, notable mostly for their loyalty to Boris and Brexit. Presumably that loyalty will be transferred to Truss. There's no mention of Brexit, and of course their loyalty is not a guarantee of their intelligence or integrity. I've heard a number of people claim that Liz Truss is bright, but I've not seen anything that suggests from her speeches and from the things she's promised that she's bright enough to understand that 200,000 quite considerably illiberally right-wing members of the Conservative Party are making the right decision. Chin chin.